I requested the Chief Justice to provide me with the name of the judge to head the commission. He has selected Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Mnyamezeli Mlungisi Zondo to undertake this task. I urge everyone to cooperate with the Commission of Inquiry. I trust that we will all respect the process and place no impediments to prevent the Commission from doing its work.
And now the same man is facing a criminal charge for failing to cooperate with the very same commission. We tried to make sense of it all this evening. Hello, I'm Aldrin Simpier, and this is Unfiltered. The State Capture Commission chairperson, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, has now requested the Commission's secretary to lay criminal charges against former President Jacob Zuma. This after he walked out last week, breaching the Commission's Act. All this unfolding as Zondo faces a tight deadline to wrap up the Commission by March next year, while the cost of the inquiry keeps on escalating. Tonight we ask you, has former President Jacob Zuma reached a dead end? Please share your thoughts on Twitter using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. That's hashtag SABC Unfiltered. Let's welcome our guest this evening, Ongama Mtimka, who is a political analyst also, but later on will be joined by UCT Public Law Professor Kathleen Powell, who we have also made attempts to invite the former President Jacob Zuma's lawyers, and they have unfortunately declined our invitation. But let's just quickly bring in Ongama into this conversation. Ongama, good morning, or rather good evening, and welcome to Unfiltered. Starting off with the question that we're asking our viewers this evening: has former President Zuma reached a dead end? What's your take on that?
Greetings from the friendly city, Aldrin. I think that he is finally, facing consequences for his approach to judicial processes, which tends to want to reassert the relative autonomy of the political, almost at times to levels at which the politically powerful want to refuse to answer questions. So I think that the commission, having taken this step, is actually refusing to allow the political to dictate as to what questions can be asked and who can be asked questions. So it's a tug of war, if you like, on the power dynamics between judicial processes and political processes.
What then do you make of this decision that has been taken by the Commission? Because after all, we're not speaking about any other ordinary South African. We're speaking here about the former president of the country, the one who set up this Commission of Inquiry.
So I listened to Judge Zondo's reasoning before he took that decision, and how he draws what the context was that led to the walkout the defiance of the commission. The time that it would have taken for them to hear what the commission's response was to their declaration that they were going to recuse themselves. And in fact, the evidence leader, Mr. Pretorius SC, had already stated that if they walked out without the permission of the Deputy Chief Justice, they would have then been in defiance. So all that it would have taken was for them to wait and argue their case, so that them leaving becomes an outcome of a process of engaging the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice as Commission Chair, and him, granting or refusing that. So that reasoning alone that the Deputy Chief Justice made actually shines a spotlight on the criminality of the act, and in fact on the deliberateness of it.
For me also, there's a sense of number one, a sense of boldness coming from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, because as I've indicated here, that we're speaking about the former president here. We're not speaking about any other ordinary citizen. And I wonder then, if you've been following, if you look at how things have unfolded in the political realm, looking, for instance, at the charges being pressed against Ace Magashule, the Secretary General of the party. What does this then tell us about the mood that's there in the country, and also this idea to make sure that the rule of law sticks?
Sure. So that's the point on the basis upon which I accepted the invitation here, by the way, to try to show how in the conduct of executive authority as well as political power at a level of the state and in politics in general, and its relationship with the judiciary. Mm-hmm. In South Africa, we have seen these tendencies of aspirant autocrats, people who would rather that political authority and the exercise of executive authority in government was not subject to constitutionality and the rule of law. And by the way, this is something which we are seeing in different parts of the world, where democracies that were known for being established and consolidated democracies are suddenly, on the basis of aspirant dictators, gravitating towards what we call fragile states, what used to be failed states. Francis Fukuyama makes the point that as political systems decay, one of the key determinants of such decay is when institutions are made to collapse as a result of the force of political power, which doesn't want to be held accountable. When there's a decline on the emphasis on institutions and overemphasis on building powerful networks which oppose processes of accountability, whether that accountability is brought about by the fourth estate, the media, or through formal platforms like commissions of inquiries or court processes. So as a survival strategy for those politicians who aspire to be authoritarian politicians, they frame processes aimed at bringing them to accountability as fundamentally political. So if you go back, for example, to what President Zuma took exception to last year when he appeared before the Commission of Inquiry was what he perceived to be a robust way of being asked questions. Mm-hmm. So he says, I am being cross-examined here, very thoroughly so. And he took exception to that, and that marked a change of tone in terms of how his attitude has been towards the commission. And I suppose it was good that he opened up with that clip where he was pleading with all of us as South Africans to actually respect the commission. So the proviso is that he respected the commission to the extent that it danced to his tune and not, in fact, ended up asking him difficult questions around some of the details on state capture.
Okay, I think there's a deeper conversation also to be had around just what you call political, the force of political power. Because there's something that happens to the individual when they no longer have that power, that force of power. What we saw even outside the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court, where Supra Maumapilu was being pushed. And mind you that this was someone who was once very powerful within the ANC. And I doubt that if he was still in the position that he held back then, that he would have been shoved the way that he was shoved by police officers. But let's have this conversation just after this. And remember that you can be part of our discussion by going on to Twitter using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. And welcome back to Unfiltered with me, Aldrin Simpier. The question we're asking you this evening is, do you think that former President Jacob Zuma has reached the end of the road? And this is in relation to appearing before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry now that DCJ Zondo has decided that the commission must lay a criminal complaint against him. And also a bit later on, we'll get you through the process of how he explained they would reach the Constitutional Court. But just quickly, let me quickly bring up Ongama again. Ongama, the question that I had earlier on was around political power. And you know, normally we say that you're only as good as your last performance. But when it comes to political power, you're only as powerful as what?
You're only as powerful as the network of supporters that keep you in office remains intact. So Jacques Paul contributed to this with his, concept of the president's keepers, those keeping President Zuma in office and out of jail. So what's interesting there, if I can bring it back to political theory, is the idea that politicians, in order to survive and remain and elongate their stay in power, they build networks. Now, what they do generally, even you can either be a good performer in office, in which case citizens vote you back on the basis of regime performance. But in the politics of the ANC, alliances have been a lot more important than regime performance, such that whether or not a minister performs is going to be kicked out if politically they don't add to what is perceived to be an alliance and a key ally. And a key ally is defined as a person who's got a huge following that they can bring to sway votes in a conference. So unfortunately, for the longest time, the ANC politics have been dominated by, the need to survive under an apartheid regime, and haven't transitioned to, politics where, in order to stay in office, you must be an excellent performer, and on that basis, your party is going to support you by voting you back in office. So alliances are a lot more important than performance in the structure of ANC politics, as we have seen them play out since 1990 in the democratic period.
Okay, and then there is, of course, the law itself, and some may argue that the law does not pander to political pressure. But really, doesn't it? Let's just take a quick listen to what Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo had to say earlier on today at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry about the steps that it will take to try and force former President Jacob Zuma to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry.
I am going to determine other dates when Mr. Zuma must appear before this commission. 2, the Secretary will issue a summons to be served on Mr. Zuma to appear before this commission during those dates. 3, that summons will be served on Mr. Zuma. 4, the Secretary of the Commission will make an application to the Constitutional Court on an urgent basis for the Constitutional Court to issue an order that will compel Mr. Zuma to appear before the Commission in accordance with the summons that will be issued. In other words, to comply with the summons. And when he attends the proceedings of the Commission in compliance with the summons, not to leave the proceedings without my permission.
Well, for more on this, we are now joined by UCT Public Law Associate Professor Kathleen Power. Kathleen, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. Was it really necessary to go to the Constitutional Court, or is it really necessary, considering that you already have the rules there?
It's not necessary in law, no. The summons is legally binding, and Jacob Zuma has to stay in the courtroom until he's excused while he's there under summons. Unfortunately, we've seen what he's done about this the first time. So I think what that Constitutional Court application is all about is to try to prevent Jacob Zuma from bringing in a new hiatus by challenging the second summons. Because if the Constitutional Court up front says Jacob Zuma obeyed the second summons, then there's no point going through the other courts. That's probably what is hoped to be achieved by it, by asking the Constitutional Court for this order. It's not certain that the Constitutional Court will even hear the case, though, because it does not usually act as a court of first instance. It usually acts as a court of final appeal.
Okay, so your interpretation of this would be that the attempt here is try to go straight to the Constitutional Court so that you don't even have to have a situation where this matter would go through the lower courts. And also considering that there's that tight deadline.
Yes. Well, you know, the term Stalingrad strategy has been associated with Zuma for many years now. He's tended to take every single point against him through all the courts. So, for example, the spy tape saga, when the DA tried to actually get access to them, I think it took more than 2 years to actually get those tapes out, away from the NPA. And when they were finally retrieved, they were found not to support Jacob Zuma's case. So because the Commission doesn't want to wait for 2 years, it's trying to short-circuit this process. Look, I do believe that any appeals and reviews and whatever that Jacob Zuma might bring now can be dealt with fairly speedily, but they certainly won't be dealt with before March. So if the Commission wants to end in March or as soon as possible thereafter, it's got to start thinking creatively to undercut any further appeals by Jacob Zuma.
I looked at the announcement from the DCJ, Kathleen, and I thought that, does this now mean that the Commission of Inquiry, which is dealing with a case where one of the witnesses is accusing the chairperson of that commission of being conflicted, now that commission is taking that very same issue, which is right at the center of what's happening at the commission, taking it to the Constitutional Court to force him to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, when the head of the Constitutional Court is actually the person who selected him to be appointed by former President Jacob Zuma to chair this commission?
Well, yes and no. To the extent that it is a case about the recusal application, and we don't know that it is, we don't know exactly what the Commission is going to ask the Constitutional Court for. But if it's a case about the recusal application, then well, recusal applications always are decided in the first instance by the judge or presiding officer against whom they are brought. That is simply how it works. So there is nothing intrinsically wrong with even the Chief Justice remaining on the court while that case is considered at the Con-Court level. He probably wouldn't. He'd probably recuse himself. But the thing is, I don't think that that's the case they're taking to the Constitutional Court. I think what the Commission is going to ask the Constitutional Court to do is simply to order Zuma to comply with the second summons.
Okay.
I don't think the Commission has any interest in arguing the recusal in front of the Constitutional Court, because it's actually an issue that shouldn't go any further. DCJ Zondo made it very clear when he tackled those grounds for recusal that they have no merit. So for him to go and argue all of that before the Constitutional Court is to give them some kind of credibility that they don't have. But I think this is all just about getting Zuma to respect the procedure of the Commission.
Ongama, as that may be, though, that when this application does go before the Constitutional Court, I foresee that the team that's representing the former president would argue that the reason why we are here is because we started at A, and A was that we believe that this person is conflicted, and until he's removed as chairperson of the inquiry, we will not allow our client to appear before that inquiry.
Well, I'm sorry, they don't have the right to do that. And Jacob Zuma is not the only president currently acting as though he can make up the law, but it's something we've got to fight when we get it, no matter how conflicted they think DCJ Zondo is. If he says you stay in the courtroom, and if he says you're under a summons, you can't just leave. And Jacob Zuma's advocates, by claiming that he could, are doing not only Jacob Zuma a disservice, but the entire country.
Okay, let's just quickly
and I think that was one of the reasons why DCJ Zondo said we have to follow this up, because this is going to send the message to all the other witnesses that they can decide whether or not they want to turn up.
Okay, let's just quickly go to an ad break. Prof, let's just quickly go to an ad break. When we come back, we'll get an opinion from Ongama as well with regards to this, because there is the judiciary, right, where the laws are being followed, but there's also the court of public opinion. And as a member of the court of public opinion, I'd love to hear from you. What's your take on former President Jacob Zuma? You can use the hashtag SABC Unfiltered. And welcome back to Unfiltered with me, Aldrin Simpier. Just a few minutes now before we say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers. Let's look at some of the tweets that you've sent through so far. And then after that, we'll get Ongama as well as Kathleen to respond to some of them. Uncle Age 49 says that he makes a mockery of our judicial system. He knows the ANC won't act against him, showing the same arrogance as Ace untouchable gangsters. And Zake says, and this one is clearly not equal to the rest. What a mess inconsistency. Soli says that, no, I don't think so. The man has managed to evade the law for 15 years. And Square Di Parte says, yes, I think he has. And I wonder if his legal team knew about the repercussions of him walking out without permission. Okay, so let's say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers, but the conversation continues on the SABC News channel on 404 on the DSTV bouquet. Okay, let's just quickly bring in Ongama. Ongama, the point that Kathleen pointed out earlier on was, of course, following the law. But then there is the court of public opinion. And the court of public opinion tends to weigh quite a lot in politics. However, though, this is not a Jacob Zuma who is running to become a president again. This is not a Jacob Zuma who's running for office. Does it play out differently this time around?
Former President Jacob Zuma remains a key political figure in South African politics. Allegedly behind a fight back campaign. So you're quite right in pointing it out that part of the political communication that is made when these appearances are made before commissions of inquiry or courts is to drive a message that we have not lost the battle. We remain politically powerful. So part of the communication and, in fact, part of the desire to want to live out on his own terms. And also, if you look at the presentation by his lawyer before the evidence leader responded last week, it's one that wants to cast aspersions on the process, but also to reassert the political power of the figure who is there, President Jacob Zuma. So the key political communication message here is that we remain powerful, we remain strong, and that is meant to bolster what the allied forces that are working to support or working on a fight back campaign, not to lose heart, because once you see the spectacle of your former, beloved leader now humbled before what looks like judicial processes, it sends the undesirable messages as far as the faction is concerned. That's why part of their strategy would be to fight strategic legal battles, while at the same time attempting to intimidate people whom they think are behind the legal processes by threatening to reveal explosive details which may make whom they believe are handlers of either the commissions or the state law enforcement institutions to pull back and pull the plug out. So when the threats don't work, like they didn't work on President Zuma's first day, in order to stop, I don't know what power they thought their political opponents have to stop the judicial processes, but they still seem to believe that once they intimidate political opponents by threatening to reveal explosive details, they can intimidate them into, inaction. And in fact, this is why I liked the courage with which the Deputy Chief Justice is able to wage the battles, while at the same time, though, listening to whatever arguments are advanced from a legal point of view. And when he responds to them, he responds within the terrain of legal speak and legal responses, even if when they are presented to him, they are both legal and political and questioning the right to exist or the right to even ask questions from the president.
Kathleen, I wonder then how this then plays out even in the judicial circles, because one thing is clear, that the ball has now been kicked into the court of the Chief Justice, Mogoeng. Number one, if we speak about the complaint that that Jacob Zuma's team intends on launching again at the JSC, and then number two, this particular application that will come from DCJ Zondo.
So this is...
Okay,
oh, sorry, were you talking to Kathy?
I just needed Kathleen to respond to that. I'll get you now.
Oh, sure.
Okay, thank you. The Chief Justice, yes, is involved, but tangentially. I mean, he chairs the JSC, but it is a bigger body than just him. And I want to pick up on Angama's point about DCJ Zondo's courage in standing up against an attempt at bullying, in effect, while remaining very much within the terms of the law. It's interesting how little he responded to that threat by Advocate Sikakani that he was now going to be taken to the JSC because he was both a judge and a witness in this case on his own recusal. Now, that was one of the emptiest threats I've ever heard in a courtroom, because it is standard practice. It's the only way a recusal proceeding works, is that the person against whom it is brought has to decide it. That's step one. So for Advocate Sikakani to present that as some kind of huge scandal on DCJ Zondo's part is dishonest. So what was interesting is that instead of flying into a temper about it or getting all defensive, DCJ Zondo just more or less left that point. So that, fine, if you want to take me to the JSC, you take me there to the JSC. That was a magnificent sovereign kind of response, not descending into the mud, the mud bath. And then as far as the case coming to the Constitutional Court is concerned, again, the Constitutional Court is a full body of judges. It's even possible, although not certain, I'm not even sure it's necessary, but it's possible that the Chief Justice could recuse himself from a case where the issue of recusal comes up with DCJ Zondo.
Should he though, Kathleen, do you think? Do you think that he should? Considering how the waters have been muddied already, do you think that it would be prudent of him to just, let me recuse myself so that we can push this matter as fast as possible?
No, because people could have said that of Judge Zondo too. Let him just quickly recuse himself, because then, Jacob Zuma is not going to complain. We'll just bring in another judge and we'll just get it done somehow. The point that Judge Zondo made, and he made it powerfully, is no, we're going to do this by legal principle. Yeah. And if it doesn't suit you, then you're going to have to just either suck it up or try and challenge it, and that won't work because actually I'm right on the law. And I think for anybody else to take measures that are kind of placating or appeasing measures is just playing into the textbook that Jacob Zuma is trying to write. I can't say that there may not be a reason for Chief Justice Mogoeng to recuse himself because he appointed Zondo as opposed to being the actual judge against whom the recusal case is brought. You may make that decision in a principled manner. But as I said, I don't think the issue of recusal will come up before the Con-Court. I know you said it's possible that the Zondo, Zuma's legal team might try to bring it up. But I think if it does, it'll get such short shrift. Yeah. And one of the ways that the full bench of the Constitutional Court can show how weak an argument is, I think, is by nobody recusing themselves. Remember that Zuma himself has been a party before that court countless times since Judge Zondo became a judge of the Constitutional Court. And he's never once complained about Judge Zondo being on the court and being biased against him. Exactly. It really is not an argument. I think it needs to be treated dismissively. Yeah,
Ongama, you wanted to comment on the question that I had earlier on, and just listening to Kathleen now, also pointing out that, listen, DCJ Zondo has been sitting at the Constitutional Court. There have been matters that have appeared before the Constitutional Court, and he was never asked to recuse himself, and he pointed that out as well when he delivered his decision. But here we're also speaking about the Chief Justice Mogoeng, who in the EFF matter against the National Assembly came out quite strong in how he wrote the judgment around the responsibilities of the president.
Sure. So I wanted to respond only to the. So one of the things we're studying in the separation of powers research is looking at to what extent does the political games, to what extent are judges and political players game theoretic in the decisions that they take. So when they take a decision, to what extent do they anticipate a response from the other player? And to what extent does that anticipation cause them to take a decision which otherwise they would not have taken? Because that's quite interesting now in terms of the role between the judiciary and the executive, but also in terms of the broader politics, the role between the judiciary and politics. So the reason why I wanted to bring that angle was because of the question you were asking about how, what I thought you were asking about how the judiciary responds to this political pressure. So I wanted to say, it's interesting how judges have maintained composure amidst a very strong critique, accusations, as among other things, leveled against them by politicians. And so they're able, notwithstanding, for example, some accusations that they may be pro a particular political faction, to not avoid decisions which may be seen to be favoring that faction when in fact they make sense from a legal point of view. Appear to want to please political opponents because they have intimidated them by accusing them of bias. So if the decision they are going to take is going to be reflecting the very same thing they were accused of, but it's the right decision to take, they take it. So that's what, for me, I'm commending about the interrelation or the relationships between the judiciary and political processes in South Africa, is the resilience of the judiciary and their ability to, notwithstanding the cloud that's created by politicians, to still make decisions which they feel are best legal decisions to be made.
Okay, and we continue that conversation just after this quick break. Remember that you can be part of our conversations by going on to Twitter and using the hashtag SABC Unfiltered.
The ones I picked and the star witnesses of this commission when it started, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, Mr. Jonas, Nhlanhla Nene, Ngwako Ramatlhodi, Feiki Mento, Trevor Manuel, Barbara Hogan, Themba Masego, and Fikile Mbalula. Right? And I want to be clear, I am not criticizing the testimony of those witnesses. I'm saying if one looks at what they had come here to say, is a particular narrative about Mr. Zuma. This commission, the question may be, what could it do? Because, Chair, you were at pains asking people to come. And I think you were at pains because you wanted all versions, but they were not coming. But of course, we know that your commission could have gone to different people in that cabinet, some of whom have a particular opposing theory on this subject matter. I don't personally agree intellectually with the two theorists you brought from the US, and I would suggest that their version is not the end of the story about this difficult concept. So that's the first ground.
Well, Advocate Moses Kakane there, the senior counsel who's presenting former President Jacob Zuma. Let's just quickly get your take on that, Kathleen, on what he's pointing out, including what state capture is. I think this is one of those clips that were heading towards his explanation around state capture, and also it being a battle between various classes, and it's those classes who decide what the interest of or what should be done with the state and how the state can provide to the people. But what do you make of his assertion, though, about the various narratives around a state capture?
I'm glad you started with that point, because I think it's one of the most scandalous things that he said in his entire presentation is that every state is captured. So what he did was he equated using the money of the state for your friends and family with using the money of the state for a particular group within the population. He equated those two things, as though anybody has ever stood up for election and said, hey, if you elect me, I'll give all your money to my friends and family. Nobody ever says that. They say, if you elect me, I will make sure that the poor and marginalized are taken care of. Or if you elect me, I'm going to cut taxes for the rich because that way money is going to trickle down to poor, whatever. What is offered is a policy. What is offered is not greed and nepotism. And to equate the enrichment of individuals with actually running a country for the benefit of the people, that he must have known that that was not a viable argument, and that it was a scandalous thing to say. It was a huge slap in the face of all the beneficiaries of the Estina dairy product and all the other beneficiaries, all the people children who've died in pit toilets, because the state wasn't doing its job, because the money was going to somebody else who was using it for personal gain. Mm-hmm. So that's my take on the narratives around state capture. I don't think, quite frankly, as a lawyer, he is in any position to comment on what those experts offered, because they were speaking as political scientists more than as lawyers. But they were talking about the way state capture works is by bringing an entire institution of the state under the control of an individual who can then use that institution for personal gain. He's trying to pretend that that's not happening. He's trying to pretend that's the same as actually looking after the poor. That doesn't work. So that's the first thing. The other thing that struck me in that long speech is just the contradictions in his own presentation. He names all the people who gave evidence that was unfavorable to Zuma. And then he says, look, I'm not saying anything about the evidence, but notice the narrative that emerges. Now, if he's criticizing the narrative that emerges, he's criticizing the evidence. Yeah, it's kind of, maybe Ongama should comment on this, because it's a political game. Those aren't legal arguments. That's a man talking in circles.
Ongama?
And that's for somebody else. It's certainly not for DCJ Zondo, because he's not going to fall for that, and he didn't.
Okay, Ongama?
I'd like to hear Ongama's view on that.
Absolutely agreed. So when I was listening to him, I was thinking, now you are on some dangerous path, because you are commenting about established concepts within the political science discipline, and you are getting them wrong. So what was it's not a question that the state, in fact, is one way or another at any given time always subject to powerful interests in society. So that's not even a debate. Yeah. But precisely the point that Kathleen has made, that when a state is captured, its institutions, its institutional framework is repurposed to serve an agenda of a narrow power elite that controls resources. And you can trace it by kinship or friendship.
Yep.
So that's where the theoretical framework differs with what he was advancing.
Okay,
and
I'm going
in
to.
fact, with the Guptas.
Apologies, Ongama. Unfortunately,
wisely,
we've run out of time, Ongama. My apologies. I just quickly want to read something from the Jacob Zuma Foundation, and I'd love to have each of your comments, just one sentence or a minute or so. So the statement reads as follows, and this was the statement issued on Friday. President Zuma assures us that he would rather face jail than allow himself to be bullied by an irregular, manipulated and unlawful process. We hope that the chairperson is aware that those pulling the strings behind the scenes do not have his interest at heart and will drop him as quickly as they picked him. Kathleen, your 1 minute starts now.
That's called projection. They think that the judiciary is captured because they've captured other institutions. They think it's how it works. So they don't see judges actually applying the law. They see judges acting for interest groups. They might even genuinely believe it, or maybe they're just saying it because they want to appeal to the group that wants to feel powerful that Ongama was talking about. But it is a scandalous thing to say about the judiciary. It is not true. And I think people will see that when DCJ, Zondo and the Commission simply stick to the line and apply the law, hopefully most people will see that actually the right thing's being done.
Okay, Ongama?
In South Africa, people underestimate, they overestimate the role that political alliances play, and they underestimate the existence of arms of the state or professionals that still value their profession. The reason why that is so is because, you see, there's something about political alliances is it dehumanizes those who belong to the networks, such that they see their value as only affirmed by the network itself and not necessarily intrinsic in them. So as a result of that, it is impossible for people who operate within those factions, whose sense of self-worth and professional claims to profession has been eroded, to believe that there are some who have not fallen for that trap.
Ongama Mtimka, as well as Kathleen Powell, thank you so much for your time. And I think this would be a nice segue into a conversation speaking about, focusing rather on the judiciary itself, considering what's happening with the accusation or allegations that have been made by the Judge President of the Western Cape High Court Division, that is Judge President John Hlophe, against who? That is the head of the JSE, the chairperson of the JSE, and also head of the judiciary, CJ Mogoeng. But that's a conversation for another day. Thank you so much for watching Unfiltered with me, Aldrin St. Pierre. From us and the rest of the team, goodbye.